The following program is brought to you by Blue Rita's An American Table, Blackwater Barrels, and Double Barley Brewing Company.
Welcome everybody. I'm Cheryl Lane, owner of Double Barley.
And I'm Emma Davis, head of sales shenanigans for Double Barley.
We also happen to be BFFs of 40 years. So Emma's also a founder in Double Barley, and she is our one and only sales ninja that we have. Want to show you around a little bit. In our entryway here, we always have local artists. So throughout the whole brewery and our tap room, you'll be able to see local art that you can purchase. We feel like craft beer is an art. So is any other media that you want to use. So come on into the tap room and I'll show you how we took apart an old barn and put it back up. We took a barn apart that was just about 5 miles down the road. And as a result of that, we took all the stuff out and put it all back up inside. So you can look around the tap room. If you want to look up here that's the middle piece of the barn up there. That's my favorite part of the barn. We put the tin up. Red tin in the back, did nothing but seal it, and we have all reclaimed wood. So we love the way it is. We tried to make it more of like a modern, rustic feel.
Rural modern.
Rural modern. So that's our whole thing here at Double Barley. We did all the work ourselves. Lots of cool friends and family and church members that came out to help us do all this, and we appreciate it. Been here 2.5 years.
It truly took a village.
Oh, it definitely, village of idiots. But yeah, this is our tap room, and you can come check it out. It's a 75 seat tap room. So at Double Barley, we make a lot of different beers. We pride ourselves in that because we have a lot of different styles. We try to let everyone know that you can come in here, always have 10 different beers on tap, but also we do a bunch of seasonals. And every one of these beers has very personal stories, and I want to share the most personal.
Names.
Yeah. So today, I want to start with Sexy Rexy. Today would have been my dad's 77th birthday. He was really the one that turned me on to beer. He had a beer collection in my house, and the cans were empty.
Beer can collection.
A beer can collection. I mean, it was as red gets. But he was the one that turned us on to beer. He would be so proud to know that we own Double Barley. That's Sexy Rexy. He loved the beach, so we honored him in that way. Emma, go ahead and tell about Sparky.
Sparky's is our coffee chocolate milk stout, and we won a silver medal with Sparky's this year at the State Fair in the North Carolina Brewers Cup, so we're very proud of Sparky. He's also named after a fellow that we know and love named Stephen Bivelsky, and he lives in Tarboro, and he makes furniture, and you'll get to see some of his handiwork when we tour the beer garden later on. It's quite beautiful. He's very talented. So this is a coffee chocolate milk stout made with locally roasted cold brewed coffee from Full Bloom Roasters in Garner. And then it's got roasted cocoa nibs and lactose, which is a milk sugar that gives it a creamy mouthfeel. So Sparky's Coffee Chocolate Milk Stout, we only make this for a few months every year, so if you get a bottle, consider yourselves lucky.
I'm going to move on to probably one of my second favorites. This is me and my family. This is also a seasonal beer. It's holiday ale, and it's brewed with cloves, nutmeg, actually 1,300 grinds on the nutmeg grinder, and I know because I did it. Our own vanilla.
I'm surprised you count that high.
I had to do it a little 10 at a time. And also with our own extract and cinnamon. And if you look closely, you can see me and my husband, my 3 crazy boys, and in the middle is our dog Barley. So very special beer, always available in November and December. And let me tell you, at what is this?
10.8?
10.4?
10.4.
If you have a mother-in-law you don't care for or something like that, have one of these. Everything will be good after that.
Yeah, it takes the pain away.
Next
up on the docket is our world champion, our Thrilla and Vanilla Porter. So this is one of the first beers we ever made, and Larry made it in the garage for us. We said, Larry, make us a vanilla porter, and he made this, and we were pleasantly shocked at how delicious it was. So it involves a double barley homemade vanilla extract, which involves a lot of vanilla beans swimming around in a little Irish whiskey. So that makes for a very flavorful extract. And the other unique thing about this brew is it's very light-bodied for a porter, so you can drink a few and not feel like you need a nap or you just ate a cinder block. So this is our Thrilla and Vanilla Porter at 8%. It's kind of become our flagship beer.
We're doing a little bit of tasting of some of our featured items here. We don't have a large menu, but everything we offer is very fresh. Our guacamole, we always use a fresh avocado, as you can tell, and we serve it in that so that you know it came from that avocado. We also have here today our pretzels, and with the pretzels are special because we make our own beer cheese dip. So we use Abbey's Amber Ale, and we use some garlic and some special cheeses, not just cheddar, but we put some Gruyere in there as well. And that's one of my favorite things here at Double Barley. We also offer it with our mustard, and in the mustard we put our steak cake stout. Emma, do you have a steak cake stout? You have a steak cake stout right there. Yeah.
So steak cake stout is our imperial stout, and it's called steak cake because it's good with steak or cake, not because it's made with steak or cake. But it is 10% ABV, and it's very smooth. That's the remarkable thing about this beer is a lot of imperial stouts have a really bitter finish, but if you take a sip of this, which I will, it's got a really nice smooth finish. It has all the yummy, delicious stout flavors you expect, a little chocolate, a little coffee, even a little bit of a leatheriness, and it's smooth and delicious, but there's no bitterness, and we think that's because Larry separates the light and the dark grains on the mash.
He's got a great way. Larry's our brewmaster, and he also is my husband of how many years?
A long time.
Yeah, 20-something, something. But his dark beers are absolutely special in the way that they make them. There's no bitter finish at the end, and they're quite special. As a matter of fact, I have one of those right now. This is our probably our best ranked beer that we make. This is our Sparky's Coffee Chocolate Milk Stout. And what makes this so special is that we get local roasted coffee from Full Bloom Coffee Roasters in Garner. So they come up here every year and we get to taste which coffee we want. This year we went with Ethiopian. They go back, they roast the beans, then they cold brew it. So after fermentation, we add their coffee, and I'm telling you, you can get the coffee on the nose and on the finish. And we also add toasted organic cocoa nibs, so it's coffee chocolate milk stout. What makes it milk is we add lactose, and you can see it's just such a smooth. Lactose makes a silky mouthfeel for any beer.
Coming up on Crafting the Brew.
And the different grains, I mean, the base malts are all pretty much similar. We use a pale malt, American pale malt, and some English Maris Otter malt.
This is Lou from Lou Rita's and American Table, inviting you to come in and taste the made-from-scratch food at our table. We make all our dressings and sauces in-house with fresh, chalkboard specials every day, North Carolina craft beers on all our taps, over 20 varieties of bourbon, jumbo wings, and the best burgers in town. Made-from-scratch food without the made-from-scratch prices. Located on Sunset Avenue, across from the Harris Teeter. Open 7 days a week for lunch and dinner, brunch on Sundays.
All right, well, this whole thing started, it was all my fault. I got my wonderful husband a birthday gift, and never did I imagine that that birthday gift would lead to what you see behind us. But I gave you a homebrew
He gave me
kit.
the pretty basic homebrew kit with the bucket and the normal things that most people start with. And I think I brewed maybe 2 or 3 batches with our good friend Scott. And after that, we ended up putting this together, which was the original homebrew kit after that.
This is not a normal size homebrew kit
no,
for
it's-
anyone out there. This is a homebrew kit on steroids that only you could have designed. So explain to them how big this is and how we did our Kickstarter campaign with it.
Yeah, so this is basically, I can brew 2 separate or 2 of the same batches at the same time. It's almost a barrel of production out of this, but this is an old cart that I rummaged up or scrounged up and put it into use for this. Basically, it's our hot liquor tank, 2 mash tuns, and 2 boil kettles. And so we did all of our brewing, probably not all within the limits of the law, but we did all our home brewing at home. And well, it's like 200 gallons a year, I think.
Oh yeah, well we did that in the first
I think we did
quarter.
that in maybe the first quarter. But this is what we also use now for some small batch stuff, and every once in a while we'll pilot something on there, although we're feeling pretty comfortable about running stuff on the big system now. So All right, so the brewing process starts pretty much with all different kinds of grain. You can see all the different varieties we have here. You know, most of the grain bill for any beer is going to be malted barley, but we also use things like oats, rye, and wheat. For the most part, that's all we use. We do use a few adjuncts and things like some California orange blossom honey and the Belgian candy syrup for our Belgian double, things like that. But we start with all this grain here. What we have moved into now that we've gotten a little bit bigger is from bags into these, which are called the super sacks. Just allows us to get a lot more grain at one time. So we are called double barley because we use a lot of grain. We use probably more grain per barrel than anybody we know for sure. And I tell people the reason why is because we don't want to try to extract every ounce of sugar and flavor out of it. We don't want to squeeze everything we possibly can out of it, because with that comes some flavors and things that we don't like and most people don't like. So that's why we have a D-rated brew house, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But once we get all this grain in and weighed out, we're going to take it over to the mill and we'll mill it. All right, so once we decide on the recipe we're going to brew and the different grains, I mean, the base malts are all pretty much similar. We use a pale malt, American pale malt, and some English Maris Otter malt. But then we also use other grain varieties that are crystal malts, which bring sweetness and some little bit of color, and dark roasted malts, which bring the chocolate and the roasted for your porters and stouts. But once we get all that together for a recipe, we bring them over here and we mill them. Okay, because basically we need to get inside that grain. So we put it through a little two roller mill here that crushes it open. Basically, takes it up through our auger, puts it in our grist case, which is just a big shiny thing for us to hold milled grain in, but it allows us to do our grain additions separately, which we do for our dark beers. Once all that's in place, we're ready to brew. This is our brew house here. We just brewed today. Just brewed a 20 barrel batch of our Touche IPA. This is a 20 barrel brew house. We brew 15, 13, and 10 barrel batches. So as we said before, you know, we're called double barley because we use a lot of grain. In some of our recipes, even for a 13 barrel batch, is close to 2,000 pounds of grain. It's about all we can fit in this 20 barrel brew house. So once the grain gets brought up and in, this is our mash tun. This is where we add hot liquor. We got a 50 barrel hot liquor tank here, and liquor in the brew house is just treated water. So we filter all our water to 20 micron, pass it over activated carbon so we don't have any chlorine or anything in it. And once we mix all that up, if you can imagine, this is just a big pot of oatmeal is what it looks like in there. We have to let that sit for a certain period of time at a very specific temperature. We target most of our mash temperatures at about 152 degrees. And during that process, that's when all the starches convert to sugar, and that's really what happens in the mash, okay? And that's the whole purpose of the mash. Once that's done, usually takes about 60 minutes. We'll rinse all that sugar water or wort out, and we'll take it over into our boil kettle here. So once we get it over into the boil kettle, like I said, we boil it for anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, depending on the recipe. We boil it for three primary reasons. The first reason is we've got to sanitize all that wort or sugar water. Beer is wort until you pitch the yeast, and I didn't make up all these rules. They've been around for a long time. So, but we boil it to sanitize the wort. We also boil it to add our hops, and hops are both a preservative, and for things like our IPA, they add some flavor and aroma compounds to it. Also helps with things like head retention and some other things there. Last reason we boil it is we actually reduce the volume. We have about an 8% evaporation rate. Just like making a gravy at home, you want to concentrate those flavors. There's some chemical things that happen during that process that we won't bore you with, but they're necessary to make good beer. You could make beer without boiling it, but it wouldn't be very good beer, so that's why we boil it. Once all that's done, we take that and we pump it down into the fermentation area. First thing we've got to do, though, is we've got to cool it down. So once we get it cooled down, we've got to get it down to pitch temperature, and for us that's around 72 degrees. That's where we normally ferment all of our ales. We do all ales here. Lager's the other style. It takes a little bit cooler fermentation temperature. But once we get it down here, these are our fermenters here. These are cylindro-conical tanks, and I'll tell you why they're shaped the way they are. But this is where we add the yeast. Now we handle a lot of yeast strains here at this brewery, and the yeast is really what brings the flavor and the character of the beer. I tell people you can have the same grain bill in the brew house and pitch different yeast, and you'd have drastically different beers. So once we get it down in here, you can imagine at this point we've got sterilized sugar water, okay? And we add the yeast, and the yeast start doing their job in here. And the yeast are what make the beer taste the way it does, and it does all the work to get us what we're after, which is the flavor and obviously the alcohol. So the yeast eat that sugar that we got in the mash. They essentially pee alcohol and fart CO2 until they're done. And when they're done, they all fall asleep and drop right down into these tank bottoms here, these cones, okay? And that's why they're shaped this way. And we'll actually harvest that yeast and use it for many generations, up to about 10 in this brewery for different strains. It's about the most that we go. Once we harvest that yeast, we'll store it. And that's our boiler getting ready to come on here. Got to have lots of steam in the brewery. But once we harvest that yeast, we'll store it in the cold box and we'll use it again, like I said, many times. Once that fermentation's over with, we will cool these tanks down to about 32 degrees. That helps to clarify the beer. Also helps to drop out the rest of the yeast and allows us at that point to go ahead and start carbonating. So once it's in these tanks, we can move it over into these bright tanks. These are flat bottom tanks over here. We use these for aging and conditioning and carbonating. But these tanks work just the same. So we'll actually carbonate in these vessels, and then we'll either keg, which is what we are just now in the process of doing right here. We're kegging out of this batch, or we'll bottle or we'll can directly out of these. Once all that gets into a keg or a can or a bottle, we put it in our cold box and we keep it cold until our distributor shows up once a week and picks up their order. All right, so once we get everything into its final package format, we'll bring it into our cold box. We built this cold box, which is pretty cool. This is a 20 by 30 cold box, about 14 feet tall. As you can see, we keep all of our kegs in here. We got cans in here, and obviously as the bottles get filled, they'll go in here. We fill in bottles tomorrow. We also do a lot of barrel aging. So you can see some Trey Hair and Carolina bourbon barrels that we are getting ready to fill. We had some out there that are already filled. I always like to show the cold box because I'm a hot nature person. I like to come in and get cooled off, but I also like to point out that the entire thing is cooled with 2 window air conditioning units. A lot of people that have come in and looked at this thing have been just really amazed at that. But the trick is those 2 little CoolBot units there. Commercial refrigeration for a box this size would probably be easily $25,000. Each one of those units comes from Home Depot for about $500, and the controller is about $300 a piece. And they were originally developed for farmers and agriculture. And the funny part is that since we've been open, we've had at least 6 farmers here build a very similar, although smaller scale unit utilizing this same technology, so that when they harvest in their produce, they can get it in, get it cooled off, and really reduce the amount of spoilage that you have. So we started our barrel aging program. I call it a program. It's as many barrels as we can afford to get. But what we have right now is the first load of Trey Hair and Carolina bourbon barrels. And we age, this is our Steak Cake Stout that we're aging right now. Barrel aging is a kind of a hot thing right now, but the reality is that people have aged in barrels for a long time. The trick to barrel aging, especially in something like a bourbon barrel, is to make sure that you've got a very consistent starting point, so that all the barrels are pretty much the same wetness and the same age and that kind of thing, so you get a consistent barrel age out of it. Now we will blend all this when the time comes to bottle and keg this out. But there's a lot of things around the flavors that people always ask us about. How do you come up with these different recipes? And what I tell people is that there are certain guidelines for every style of beer: a porter, a stout, a pale, an IPA. But those are fairly large kind of guidelines and things. And we like to. There's a lot of playing around with the different malts that we use and the different hops and the techniques that we're using. I tell people, if you don't like to eat and you don't have a good flavor, a taste, or a palate, it's going to be hard to bring the flavors and things that you want into the beer. Having an idea of what you want and being able to translate that into a recipe and a brew that's going to taste like that, that's the trick. So we're very fortunate in our ability to get those things dialed in the way we want them. So a lot of people want to get into the brewing business. It's a cool business. I'll be honest with you, but at the end of the day, it's a business, and you've got to be successful, and you have to make a good product. It has to be consistent, it has to be high quality, and you got to be able to make money at it. One thing that Cheryl will tell you is she's not quite sure if we know how to make a cheap beer here, so we don't try that hard. But when I started out with this, I knew I had good beer and I had a good recipe, and knew it from just more than having all my friends and neighbors come to the house and drink my beer. Because a lot of people drink your beer and tell you it's awesome because it's free, and they'll tell you all that good stuff. But once you get it out and you get it into judges' hands and you submit it to the American Homebrew and you get feedback and you win some first round things and you get that kind of a basis, then it kind of solidified, for me at least, that I had a product that people that knew what they were talking about enjoyed. Cheryl and I are both engineers, both from NC State. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry, still am. That's my day job. And we worked for a long time on this business plan. I think there's a lot of people out there that just want to jump in and go for it, and this is just not that kind of an industry. There's a lot of things that are scientific about it. Sanitation, cleanliness is paramount in brewing to ensure that you've got good flavors. And my background is in pharmaceutical and aseptic processing. I understand how all that works and what's important and what we can do. Like I said, 2 years we spent more or less working on a business plan and talking to people that were going to invest, which are primarily friends and family. Most of them are still friends. Family you can't do anything about, so they're stuck with us. But we went and we raised money, and we had a plan for how we were going to get that money, and it's not a cheap endeavor. As you can see here, we didn't really go small, and we came out of the gate knowing what our end goal was, and our end goal was to be a regional craft brewery. That's what we still plan to be. We're going to make sure that we own North Carolina before we move out of the state. We're continuing to grow that here. But going from brewing something in your garage to this scale is a massive leap. And I can tell you, if your significant other doesn't believe in it, it's never going to happen. And if your investors don't believe in it, it's never going to happen. And most importantly, if your consumer doesn't like what you're selling and you don't differentiate yourself from the multitude of other breweries out there, you're probably not going to make it. So it's tough. And it's still tough. We've been in business for 2.5 years now. We just became cash flow positive here, which is a major thing for us, and I'm sure our banker loves to hear that as well. But it's a volume business too. It's very difficult to make 300 or 400 or 500 barrels a year and be viable as a business in this industry. So, we got to get to a certain minimum before you can do that. So, the future.
Let's hope we're together.
That's our probably number one. That's our number one hope, is that we're still together in the future. So we've made it this far, so we kind of half joke about that. But owning your own business is a stressful thing, and especially something like this where we've gone pretty much wide open from the beginning. In the immediate future, we just started canning in January. You'll see, more can offerings. Our seasonal wheat will be out in another 6 to 8 weeks, and that is going to be our Peaches and Cream Field of Dreams. It's going to be very tasty. We change the fruit up every year. This year is Peaches and Cream. So you saw the barrel aging that we're doing right now. We're reaching out to a lot of different Carolina vineyards and distilleries to try to make this our Carolina Barrel Age series, which is really what we're trying to do with that. Our head brewer, Mark, would love to do a sour, so we may try to do a small batch of sour and see how that works out. It's not something that we've done. Well, we actually did. We did a very, very small batch one time, and it turned out really well, so pretty excited about that. What else?
I don't know. I think going out of state. I think right now we wanted to make sure that we do everything to be all present in North Carolina. But I would say in the next year or so, we will definitely be out of state distributing.
Yeah, I think so.
At least package size. So,
Yeah.
And
Cans
the
and
5-year
bottles.
plan would be hopefully to be regional if we could pull that off.
Yeah, it starts like that. We'll move into South Carolina, Virginia, and then hopefully move out even further than that. Our primary goal right now is, number one, stay married. Number two, don't live in a box because we're bankrupt. And most importantly, though, I mean, honestly, we joke about that, is just continuing to make, good beer, and making beer that people enjoy to drink, talk about it, and and they get the same thing every time. So that's our nearest goal every day when we're back there, is making sure we're brewing the best quality beer that we can brew, and making sure that we get it out to the consumer and that it's fresh and that everybody's super happy with it. So.
Yeah, and one of my goals for running the front of the house is also to continue to give impeccable service and hospitality.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves at that. I think that is at least what yours is, always to make the consistent beer, and mine is to make the people consistent. And so far, it seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah, I think people, we designed this whole area up here with the tap room and everything in the beer garden outside just to be very comfortable. And when we were home brewing, we had a lot of people who used to love to come over, and we wanted that same feel here. Come in, have a beer, kind of kick back, like somebody's really nice man cave basement. I say man cave, but this
really?
is, I know, right? So this got actually, I had nothing to do with any of this other than like building and being labor. So anything that's style related, that's all Cheryl.
Oh
so.
yeah, I'm full of style, just so you know.
But we want, we pride ourselves also in the customer experience. People want to come in and try the beers and be comfortable and talk to the bartenders, talk to us, talk to the brewers, and I think we do a good job of that. And
So far, so good.
So far.
We'll have to keep it up.
Yep.
Stay tuned, and who knows what Double Barley's going to.
Next time.
It's funny, when we sit and we watch, they'll come in early and they'll start with flights. And they'll start with 4 that they think they want to try. They'll find their favorite, and that's kind of what they zone in on for the rest of the night.
The preceding program has been brought to you by Lou Rita's An American Table, Blackwater Barrels, and Double Barley Brewing Company.